Welcome to Authored by Us, a podcast celebrating children's books about characters of color or of different cultural experiences, and the authors who bring these diverse works to life. Each week, we invite you to join us as we turn the pages of these bookshelf gems and hear from their creators who understand that stories of diverse experience truly come to life when authored by us. Here's your host, Zenzi Hodge.
Greetings and welcome back, listeners. As I prepared for this episode, I thought back to a Whoopi Goldberg comedy special that aired on HBO several years ago. And I was probably at an age where I should not have been watching that content, but I watched it nonetheless. And during one of her segments, she portrayed a young girl who appeared on stage with a shirt on her head. Sounds kind of weird, huh? But we later learned that this shirt represented to this little girl who was about 7, it represented long blonde hair. And this child wished that her hair was similar to the shirt. And she wished that her hair would do what the shirt did, which was what she called cascade down her back. And it got me to thinking about hair, about my hair, about our hair, and how people see us when they see our hair. This week's author, Zenda Walker, is here to talk with us about her book, Know Your Heritage, Zara's Wash Day. And in her book, she will bring conversation and pride forward and hopefully get us to a point of untangling the discomfort that comes with holding high our heads that carry these beautiful crowns. So welcome to our show, Zenda.
Thank you so much for having me, Zenzi. It's a pleasure.
First, when I learned about your book, I'll be very honest, I was excited just about the Z's. And so if anyone hasn't picked it up yet, her name is Zenda. Her book is called Zara's Wash Day, and my name is Zenzi. So I am always excited when I see someone with a Z in their name, whatever they're doing. So I'm happy to have 2 Z's join us on the show. Now, I remember as a little kid that Sundays in our household, that was the day my mom washed our hair. You know, we grew up on St. Thomas. There were times we went to the beach. And so if you went to the beach on a Saturday or a Sunday, it made the hair washing experience a little bit longer. But my mother spent Sunday evenings washing my hair, my sister's hair, and it got washed, it got cleared out, and she combed it for the week ahead. And so before I even got into your pages and I looked at the cover, it brought up all of this nostalgia of my Sunday afternoons or Sunday evenings with my mom getting the hair done. So tell us about your book.
Thank you so much, Zenzi. So yes, Know Your Heritage, Zara's Wash Day is all about the wash day experience. And like you said, wash day is a day that's celebrated by, or is incorporated into the lives of so many people of African descent. It's a day or any set of hours in a day that we dedicate to washing, moisturizing, and styling and preparing our hair for the week. And this is a tradition, or what I like to call a rite of passage or ritual that many families, especially young Black girls, have experienced. And when I think about that time, I think about me and my twin sister and my mother doing this on Saturday mornings was our wash day. And, we had, it wasn't always pleasant, right? Like it was, we have this, really tightly coiled, kinky, textured hair. And oftentimes it would get tangled or pulled, and we had sensitive scalps. So we didn't always look forward to it, but we knew it was a part of our week or every 2 weeks that we would prepare our hair. And so we got ready for it. And it was a lot of time spent, right? It could go anywhere from 2 hours to 4 hours, depending on the style. But it was also a time that I remembered being a bonding moment, right? And an opportunity because of all that time to talk with our parents or watch our favorite show together. And there were moments that I was able to share history of with my father and mother about our family history and even history connected to our hair.
As you talk about that, I see myself sitting on a pillow when I was a kid and my mom clearing the hair out. And the roles have reversed. I have a son, but he has a lot of hair. And so we go through this process as well so that he is able to wear his hair how he chooses. Sometimes it may be in an afro, it may be sponged, or he may actually have braids or twists. But this is something that does continue. And it's sort of a rite of passage, I guess, with parents and children, with taking care of their hair. And it's also a sign of love. It's showing love and helping them to adorn themselves. So I always appreciate that.
I love that you bring that up because boys have wash days too, right? And you're right. This moment in time or these rituals actually do have a big impact on how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our hair, and then it affects us throughout our lives and makes us the people we are today.
This is your first book. So why was this the story that you chose to tell, and why was it important for you to tell it at this particular time? Because there's so many other things that we could write about, but this was a story that came forward at a particular time for you. So tell us about that.
That is, wow, that's a great question. So I'll tell you this, I feel like I've had this book in me. So my background is that I'm a hairstylist. And so I've always really been involved in just from even being a little girl playing with my dolls and doing their hair, and including my own hair experiences growing up and then wanting to make a career out of it. I always wanted to impact the industry in some way. But when 2020 hit and we went through all the impacts of 2020, including a global pandemic, on top of that being thrust into a world of homeschooling, which none of us as parents were ready for, working full time and trying to kind of balance that out. And then we went through this really this racial reckoning in America that hit us in a different way due to being forced into silence, right? And being forced into stillness and having to really watch and reckon with what's been happening for over 400 years. Those three things in back to back in 2020 really stirred something in me, and it really lit a fire under me that actually can never be distinguished at this point. And it made me kind of look back into some of the things I had been writing over the years because writing had always been an outlet for me. Um, and then I thought to myself, I started looking at the moments I was having with my daughter's wash days, and I've been having these conversations with her about her hair and the history of her hair and why her hair, curly haired and textured hair, is so special. I've been having these conversations for years, but I thought, wow, I've been having these conversations, and I know that this could be conversation that can help other parents who are experiencing the same thing. But what gave me the courage to really put it on paper and to pursue the publishing process was all the impacts of 2020 and needing an outlet because I couldn't scream. I couldn't stop crying, or I could scream, right? But no one could really hear that, right? In me.
Yeah.
Or, I needed some way to, release a lot of the emotion and the gift that I have in me that I really couldn't even express during that time of isolation. And I decided that I was going to use this manuscript and then start to reach out and look up what this publishing process would be. And I decided to just go for it. And I couldn't be more proud that this is a project that started from a concept and that has really taken off. And I'm getting so many reactions, great reactions about how it's helping.
Zenda, you touched on something that's really important, that the hopes that your book brings conversation forward in households or out in other spaces. And while this is a book that's written for children, it's covering a topic that impacts many of us as adults. And I read a recent article in I Ponder magazine, and they featured Black women discussing the Crown Act. And some listeners may not be familiar with it, but the Crown Act bars discrimination against race-based hairstyles. So when you see a book like Zara's Wash Day, you're introducing the conversation about our hair and the politics of our hair at a very, very early age. So where do you see this book in terms of furthering those conversations, not just in Black homes, but outside of Black homes as well? Because you're hoping that as an author, it's not just a Black reader that's going to receive your book, or that it's just a Black child that's going to receive your book, but perhaps a child who does not look like Zara. So where do you see your book taking those kinds of conversations?
So this is a great point, Zenzi, because I'm actually living in California has been really great as the first state to adopt, the Crown Act. And I can tell you plenty of stories of where I believe that my hair impacted where, maybe I didn't get an interview because of the perception my hair gave off, or right. And the fact that maybe my hair didn't, fit, the standard of an employer, or intimidated somebody in some way, or gave them some preconceived notion about me. And I think it's very important because not every state has adopted this act yet. And so we still have, a ton of vulnerability out there in the world, where we can be discriminated against. And where my book fits in is I believe that the reason why it was really important to write a book for children in particular is that I really wanted to start a conversation with children and their parents and start to instill pride and understanding and a sense of self and foundation for children to understand that our hair is not just about the beautiful aesthetic that you see in front of you or on now the runways at Fashion Week or in Vogue magazine, right? It's not just about the aesthetic, that it links to just a deeper story of culture, of politics, of socioeconomic, all the things that our hair was designed to do. And these hairstyles were linked to really identifying who you were in your culture, and where you stood in society. And to this day, we are actually celebrating those traditions, and some of us don't even really know it, right? So this book is set to educate, inform, but you're right. I'm signaling that this book is for families of African descent, but it's for everyone. And you're right. You have to just have, as a community, a more progressive thinking that, you may not be of African descent, but there's still some takeaways you can have of this. And I think when you understand some of the cultural traditions of different people of different backgrounds, it actually leads to more appreciation, acknowledgement, and understanding, and can really start to bring us to this place of healing.
And truly being inclusive.
And inclusive.
You and I had an earlier conversation about a child that I knew who attended a school where she was one of a few Black children, and she had these beautiful Afro puffs. I thought they were beautiful Afro puffs, and I guess that encouraged other children to want to touch her hair, and it made her so uncomfortable that she asked her mom not to put her hair in Afro puffs anymore because all the little girls wanted to touch her hair. And it made me so sad because I thought about that. I loved my Afro puffs, and if I may be dating myself, but I remember when Lady of Rage talked about I rock rough and tough with my Afro puffs.
Yeah.
And here was this little child who felt that, no, I can't do that because someone is going to touch them. So let's change my hair so that I don't have to deal with that. And so when a child goes through that, they're feeling that perhaps something is not right with the hair that I have, or I don't want to be placed on display because of my hair. But what I found with your book is that you wanted to make sure that children understood, one, your hair is of pride. It's your pride. And there's the heritage behind that. And you should walk proudly and you should stand tall, and show that hair, and that there's also a history behind the styles as you covered. And there's something you did like in the very beginning of your book. So at your very first page, the images you presented were very familiar to me. A mom with her natural hair, and the little girl, she had on her little sleep bonnet. Now, you could have started your book at any other point in the day. Zara could have been outside playing with some friends, and you could have said, "Come on in. It's time to take a bath and let's wash your hair." But you started your book at the very beginning, and you were showing to me, you were showing her hair and that process from the moment it began. Tell us a little bit about that.
So absolutely, I think I really wanted to show the tenderness of the family relationship and me, starting the day off and making sure that you would see a mom in her natural state, but also the protective nature of a bonnet, and that from the time we go to bed or wake up in the morning, there is a ritual or process or this kind of sacredness to the hair ritual. And so I definitely wanted to again humanize as well the story. And I think what makes it super familiar for so many is that image, right? The image and the tenderness of what we do every day, which is we get up and we try to approach our day with love. And I think the imagery is so important because oftentimes, I think oftentimes this was kind of something that we didn't always talk about, right? Our
Mhm.
rituals and like wrapping our hair at night, and we used to be even afraid
Yeah.
to act, to talk about it. But I think it's important to show that it's normal, right? And it's a part of
Yeah.
our experience.
In the beginning, I mentioned, the Whoopi Goldberg segment with the little girl with the shirt on her head. And I shared with you that that's something that my sister and I did. Either you had a shirt on your head, or you had a towel on your head, or you had something that simulated what you believed was this desirable hair, this good hair. And I love that you twisted the perception in your book that pressed and laid hair is not only something that was reserved for a special occasion, but that it was something special in and of itself, and that our natural hair was not special occasion worthy or special enough. And
Mhm.
so you started out by telling Zara that every day is special when you have curly hair. And I love that.
Thank you. And you bring up a great point. Thank you. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like these are the things when we were growing up, we didn't always feel that way, right? And so when I talk about even the wrapping of the hair, I really wanted to celebrate that we actually, when we wrap our hair at night, we're really truly like protecting it. But then we also wrap our hair in celebration for different events too. When we think about, different African prints, and we wrap our hair in West African gele or duku, like, um, as a way to celebrate. And it's also, it was also not traditionally, especially in times of American enslavement. We wrapped our hair differently because of that, right? Right. So we wrapped our hair
Right.
not only when we were working in the fields, in the cotton fields, to protect, but also during that time during enslavement in America, we were not allowed to show our hair because there were laws like called the Tignon laws of the 1700s, where women in Louisiana were actually there was a law that they could not reveal their hair because of the potential that white men would be attracted to it. And so what we did every time was to empower ourselves, even when we were told to be silent. So here we are in those times wrapping our hair, but on special days like Sundays when we were allowed to worship, we would decorate our tignons, and actually it was still a way that no one could prevent the beauty of it, right? We would still take our beads and our brooches and make it a beautiful thing. So again, we have an entire history with the wrapping of our hair, and I started the book off with that protective wrapping so that we can celebrate that too.
But you also used like some hair language that in the past may not have been positive, and you made that very positive. So as a hairdresser, you have probably seen the baseball cap that said bad hair day. So if somebody's having a bad hair day, you wore the baseball cap, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of remember those. But you took words like kinky and curvy and coily, things that before we may say that was bad hair day cap worthy. And you did not make those words seem like descriptions of shame for your hair. You used kinky and curvy in such a positive way. And you didn't make reference to them being difficult, but rather that these were characteristics of pride linking back to our African heritage. So when you talk about how our hair was worn during enslavement, it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, you gave a tour of our ancestry as you talked about each hairstyle that someone in Zara's family wore. You not only talked about hairstyles, your illustrations showed those styles. So it brought them to life even more.
Thank you so much. And yes, kinky, coily, curvy, these are all characteristics of our link to an ancestral bloodline, right? And so when I talk about kinky, I really want people to know that this just means that your hair is tightly coiled and may have even a Z shape. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, celebrate it because it is your link in the same way that the rings of the bark of a tree tell the history and the years and it shows what that tree went through. Our coily texture, our curly, our wavy, our kinky texture is that link and story about where we're from.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with Zenda Walker.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. Authored by Us is made possible by listeners like you. We thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
We're back with author Zenda Walker, and we're talking with her about her book, Know Your Heritage, Zara's Wash Day. So, Zenda, perhaps my favorite part of the book is where Zara is told by her mother that her hair is a crown. Sometimes we've heard that our hair is our beauty, and that may be referred to its length or what's deemed to be good hair, but the image of a crown says royalty. And Zara and some other little girl, perhaps wearing a t-shirt on her head, needed to know that. So what do you hope that young readers will take away from Zara's Wash Day? And what do you hope parents or other adults may take away from the story as well?
So I really would love for children of all backgrounds to truly take away that our hair is something to be cherished and that because it carries so much of our history and our family roots and our genes, um, that there's more to it than just the aesthetic, right? It really goes much deeper, but that we can also have fun and express ourselves with it, right? So we can express the pride that we have in our background, but we can also express, how we're feeling that day or, where we are in a moment. And it's also another tool to help to communicate to others without even really having to say a word. And I would like to also help parents to understand that this, to really cherish those moments when you have wash day and use that quality time to have fun with your children, speak to them, share with them some family stories, share with them family history, have them take out their dolls and also maybe mimic and mimic the styles, right? But also teach them that everything surrounding the hair is important and that it's also part of our self-care, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally.
So, Zenda, sometimes we have books where, our characters don't have names. I wrote a book about a little kid and I didn't give him a name, but my son absolutely believed that the character in this book was him. But your book does have a name. Your character, her name is Zara. So, is Zara in Zara's Wash Day inspired by someone in particular?
Yes, Zara is inspired by my daughter, who's now 7, Zara Olivia. Hi, Zara.
Hi, Zara.
It's inspired by her, and it really is inspired by a conversation we've been having on our wash day that I thought would be really helpful to share with other parents as well.
And so, since this book is inspired by your Zara, I know that you two have read it over and over. So there's a special part of the book I'm sure that you would love to share with our listeners.
Absolutely. All right. So, welcome to Zara's Wash Day. Little Zara woke up from her sleep just as happy as she could be. Mama was already close by, and so was her favorite toy, Lammy. And Lammy's here with us today. It was Saturday wash day, and Mama gave her a few clues. Hair products were laid out on the kitchen counter. There were curl creams, conditioners, and shampoo. First, Mama would wash, condition, towel dry, and then detangle. But the pulling of stubborn hairs was more than Zara's tender scalp could handle. Zara's laughing because it's so familiar. Mama, why must I always have my hair styled in afro puffs, twists, and braids, but have to wait for a special occasion for it to be silk pressed and laid? Dearest Zara, every day is special when you have curly hair. Each strand tells our family's story and requires tender loving care. Zara's eyes widened with curiosity. Mama, what do you mean? How can our hair tell a story? Isn't it just meant to be seen? Our hair spirals, zigzags, and bends. It's kinky, curvy, and can sometimes coil. These are all characteristics of an ancestral link to people from African soil. Soiled that is warmed by the sun. Africa's beauty is hard to beat. Our hair was designed as a natural shield to protect us from the heat.
I love that. I love that.
you.
Thank you so much for reading that with us.
Yes.
Because you covered some of the parts we talked about. And then you ended with our hair definitely protecting us from the heat.
Yes.
And I remember my mom sharing that with us when we were growing up because we grew up on St. Thomas. And if you had your hair out, whether in puffs or in a little afro, it sure did protect you from the sun beating me down.
Yes. And what's interesting about that is like really the biology of our hair is so special. And a lot of people ask me, we talk about this hashtag phrase, right? Black girl magic or black boy joy or hair magic or hair love. And when we think about what curly hair does when it comes out of your hair and the fact that it's more dense at the bottom because those curls really help to protect the scalp and hide it from the sun, our hair actually naturally absorbs UV light, right? So it protects us from the sun, but at the base of our root, it actually tends to be less dense, which provides a ventilation system to cool us. And so this is typical of textured hair from people who are normally reside in warm areas not near the equator, right? So our hair was designed for this purpose. And to me, when you think about black girl magic or black boy joy, I mean, this is part of it.
It sure is. It sure is. And we talked a little bit about the language that you use, but the language that you have in your book, the kinky and the coil, you see that in your illustrations. So you found an illustrator that not only brought images to life, but I mean, she gave such life to very specific things and the detail that she added to the hairstyles. So tell us about your illustrator.
I love my illustrator. Her name is Princess Karibo, and she resides in Nigeria, West Africa. And I came across her name in an article of up and coming illustrators and artists that are familiar with drawing and capturing Black art and Black features. And so when I saw her artwork on her Instagram and on her website, which is princesskart.com, I knew immediately that this was the person that I wanted to illustrate the book. And so when I reached out to her and we had some good conversation and I let her know what I was trying to do, it was a match made in heaven. And we had a great 3-4 months back and forth of collaborating on what images would be in the book. And these illustrations are affecting so many children. I get pictures sent to me every day of children seeing themselves represented in this art form, and they're loving it.
That's a good point that children, because they get to see themselves in these books, there's definitely an impact. What has been some of the reactions that you've received towards your book, Zara's Wash Day?
I get pictures sent to me every day with children holding up the book and posing with the book, and children with their hair styled in some of the same styles, like the Fulani style that you see there, the Bantu knots images, and then I get parents as well who are sending me these pictures and just thanking me so much for the story and saying how much their children love the book and are excited that they're seeing themselves represented. And even some of the parents who are not of African descent are sending me notes saying, they know that this book is to celebrate Black children and people of African descent, but they also found so much value in it for their children because their children have friends and family members too that have textured
Mhm.
hair and wear their hair like this. And now they actually, see even more of the story behind it, and they're excited, and they're excited to share with other friends as well. So this is touching so many people in so many different ways, and it literally shows me that the mission I set out for is being accomplished with this book.
Now, I know that sometimes our feedback is not always positive. And so when you're talking about something like hair, which is already politicized, and we've gone through in our history how we feel about our hair, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So has all of the reactions, have all of the reactions been positive, or can you share with us some that have not been as positive as you would have hoped?
Sure, you're absolutely right. A lot of the reactions have been positive, but I've had some questions that have come up that aren't so positive, right? So I've even had Black women say to me, "Well, why did you make the character so dark?" Right? And so, and that that for me was interesting because while the book is inspired by Zara and myself, I was very intentional about the skin tone I chose. Because it was inspired by us didn't mean the characters had to look exactly like us. But what I knew would translate to people of African descent was to see a brown or dark skin characters, because you never really actually see you see characters of multicultural backgrounds and characters that of African descent, but they're not always portrayed with this really rich dark skin. And I knew that no matter what spectrum or skin tone you are as an African American person, most people will be able to relate. Anybody who has African descent will be able to relate to seeing a brown skin or dark skinned child or family in a book. And so I was very intentional about it. And what was interesting about how that has come up for a lot of people was to show that issues of colorism
Still exists.
will always be a continuous conversation in our community, as well as how it's linked to even the different textures of our hair, because we know as a people we have so much diversity in our skin and our hair, but we know what has traditionally been celebrated is what looks closest to the European aesthetic, right? So if you have fairer skin, or if your hair has a looser curl pattern or silkier
Mhm.
texture, that's what has traditionally been celebrated. And so we know a lot of those, um, that trauma, even, right? Growing up,
Mhm.
not feeling or being told you are as beautiful or that you match the standard beauty has affected us for generations and generations. And it's something that we are continuing to have conversations about to get to a place of healing.
And so we have covered the wearing of a shirt on your head.
Oh yeah.
We've covered the child who does not want to have her hair out because of how others respond to it or how others engage with her hair. And now we're talking about parents, a parent or a reader sharing that why would you make the child look this particular way? And you're right, because we have been conditioned to think that there is a particular standard of beauty, of acceptability, of imagery. And so when we when we don't see that in books, I think we've probably been conditioned to think that that's okay.
Absolutely.
And then there's some parents, some readers that we're looking for ourselves in these books, and we receive those books wholeheartedly. But then there's still for some others that when we see that in books, we go back to a mindset that no, this is not okay. And so I think it's one of the things that we want to make sure with our authors that we talk to when we talk about their books is that we we communicate to readers, whether they are young readers or older readers, that seeing someone who looks like you in the pages of a book, yes, that's important.
Absolutely.
And or seeing someone who looks like a friend of yours, that's important. We're not all going to look alike, but it's important that we see different people and that we can appreciate and we can understand what it means for a friend to have their hair, as much as it is important for a friend to have their hair wrapped because of religion or because of natural hair. It's important that we embrace those things that make us diverse people.
Absolutely.
And having children's books, I do believe, is a key thing to making that happen, to making those conversations happen. And perhaps some of us adults need to go back to reading these children's books so we can kind of unlearn some things that we were conditioned to believe when we were, through the years.
Yes, and a huge unlearning, right? A moving towards unlearning, absolutely.
Yeah. So Zenda, your book, you coined a word, heritage. So Hairitage, right? Why was it important for you to come up with this word and make this a part of your title?
That is so fun. My book actually went through a couple different titles, but then I thought, wow, I'm incorporating so much ancestry and Heritage, heritage about our West African and East African and South African roots that I thought, wow, this is actually about our history as well. So why not bring the two worlds together? This story about our hair and then our heritage, and have it really, you know, combine and be this kind of mashup of of what the book is about. And so it led me to even a bigger idea about this being even a series that also moves into this heritage of other cultures, because what I really truly believe is that everyone has a heritage. When we think about, especially when we think about people of color, our indigenous ancestors, our indigenous culture has always influenced our modern style and our modern culture and our modern politics. So I thought, wow, this can be even a bigger, more global story. And so heritage, I would love for that to be adopted across the globe as even something that we can incorporate into our um, our educational curriculum.
So you also, now we're going to go to the heritage, because there's something I noticed in your book that you snuck in there.
Yes.
And it was in Zara's outfit. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, is that flag from, tell us about that flag that you added
Right.
onto her outfit.
So my parents were born and raised in Jamaica, West Indies. And so I grew up with so many Jamaican traditions, food, patois. um, and one moment that I had in my childhood, which was linked to my Jamaican heritage, is that it was during a wash day where my sister and I were fidgeting in my mom's chair in the kitchen while we were getting our hair detangled. And I'll never forget my father walking down into the kitchen, and he was observing us being kind of crying and fidgety. And he said, Zenda and Rachel, I know that right now it doesn't seem like it's fun, but getting your hair done. But let me tell you a story about your hair. He said, your hair is linked to your maroon ancestors. And we couldn't have been more than 9 years old at the time. But my eyebrow was raised. I thought, maroons, tell me more. And my dad talked about the maroons being enslaved people brought over from Africa who were dispersed throughout the Caribbean, and in particular Jamaica. Maroons who were people who resisted bondage and ran to the hills of Jamaica to set up free communities. And a lot of the history that I've learned growing up didn't always talk about the resistance of enslaved people. But when my dad talked about these Maroons and the free communities that they set up and how they have so much culture still in, in their environments, and it was so, at that time at 9 years old, I felt so prideful. I felt a sense of self. I felt a little bit more grounded. And my mother doing my hair in that moment didn't even bother me as much anymore. I didn't feel the detangling pain anymore. I actually just wanted to know more. And it made me, in that moment, after my mom styled my hair, look at my style even differently. And it was one of those moments where my dad was telling us about our Jamaican history and our Jamaican roots, and how so much of West African culture in particular has influenced Jamaican culture with the food and the music. And it makes me see just how closely linked we truly are, and how, even though throughout the years there have been moments to silence our history or to not even help us to know more about our history, we still manage to celebrate our culture through our hair, our food, our music, our dance, the way we walk, the way we talk. It just lives in us. And so this is another way to really just confirm and affirm that history.
Yeah. And you do such a great service to educating and preserving that history. At the end of your book, you included a glossary. And so if anyone didn't know what a Bantu knot was, you can flip to the back and you learn what Bantu knots are, where they come from. And then you can also flip towards the front of the book and see the hairstyle. So you did a great piece of education with that glossary. And something I would be remiss if I did not mention, since we're talking about the Bantu knots, I don't know if anyone else caught it, but I sure did. I caught that you gave tribute when you noted that, why have one Bantu knot when you can actually have 22? Was that a particular reason that you did that?
Yes, indeed. I am a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Spring '99. Yes. Sorry for the noisy background, but yes. And you'll see throughout the book, there's a lot of those kind of moments where I'm actually giving celebration to our Black history. And we know that with our Divine Nine and with organizations such as Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, these were organizations that began due to the fact that we needed, as a community, to come together and be a part of something where we could celebrate and learn from each other at a time where we were being denied the education that we wanted. We were being denied entry into general educational institutions. But we know when we founded these organizations at Howard that they would continue to deliver great public service and lift up people of color who really needed that sense of community.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Authored by Us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show with your host, Zenzi Hodge.
So we're back with Zenda Walker. Zenda, I want to talk about the dedication in your book. So usually readers jump from the cover to like Once Upon a Time, so wherever the first page is, and they tend to miss out reading the dedication or the acknowledgments page. And your book, you have acknowledgments that are not just for people that supported you on your journey and for people who also are no longer with you, but you also pay a special tribute to other authors. And as an author, I was touched. So tell us about that.
So I thought it was important to acknowledge that there are so many authors that have come before me that have also written books that uplift our youth and our people. And so I wanted other authors to know that I've been inspired by them and that we're all together on this. And so I think about authors like Toni Morrison, right? And Nikki Giovanni, um, Maya Angelou, and Cicely Tyson, um, and and so many authors who influenced me and made me feel like, wow, I could do this too. I had to pay tribute.
As you talk about specific authors, I definitely have to ask, what was the book that had the most impact on you as you were a child growing up?
I have to say Toni Morrison is one of my most celebrated authors. And the reason why is I'll never forget, even as a young girl, reading The Bluest Eye and the message that that book sent to me about, you know, being confident in who I am or what constituted beauty for me. And it was impactful to the point where I've read it several times and even shed a few tears, even knowing what the story was about. And so I had a moment in my childhood where once I got to the place where I could read and understand The Bluest Eye, really changed my world. And so I want to tell you this, a quick story, but it was one of the most impactful moments of my life. And I couldn't have been more than 6 years old, 6 or 7 years old, around my daughter's age, when I had a crush on a little boy. And at that time in your age, it was simply a crush on the fact that he was the class clown. He made everyone laugh. He didn't have a particular aesthetic. In fact, he was not black. He was other. But he was the class clown. So we all loved how much he made us laugh. And so I'll never forget a day where we were writing a note back and forth where, he asked, well, do you like me? And it was yes or no. And I checked the box yes. And then I wrote back, do you like me? And checked the box yes. And then we went through all of this liking each other. And then he asked a question at the end of our back and forth. And it asked, are you white or black? And at the time, I knew I was black. And at the time, I also knew that the messages that I had been sent throughout that time of growing up, outside messages, because my family was very affirming, but the outside messages told me that if I say that I'm black, there's a possibility that he will not like me. And so in that moment, at 6 or 7 years old, I had a lot of anxiety and stress, but I clicked the box, I'm white. And it was so painful and anxiety ridden, but I did it. And he sent a note back and asked me, so what's wrong with your hair? So in that moment, it let me know that, first of all, my hair told who I truly am. Right? It told me the truth. It outed me, but it also let me know that something might be wrong with my hair. And so we were only 7 at the time, right? It's very innocent. He didn't know the impact that that would have on me. And sorry for the noise. He probably also didn't know that it was a hurtful thing for him to say. However, it just goes to show it doesn't matter how much you're affirmed in your life by your loved ones, that there are messages that we are sent in our developmental stages that will communicate something quite different. And so that is why I think during my entire life, that's why, my sister and I would play and want this long blonde silky hair all the time, or look at the blonde blue-eyed Barbies and think that they might actually be more beautiful than the brown-skinned dark-eyed Barbies, right? Or the dolls with yarn hair versus the doll with silky hair. So again, it also goes to the fact that, only recently did we start making sure that the ethnic aisle in the beauty section or hair ethnic aisle was also merged as a beauty aisle, right? Because when we were growing up, anything related to our hair or our skin wasn't necessarily seen as beautiful or worthy of being mentioned as a beauty. So I say all that to say, again, it is just like we talked about earlier, seeing your image represented and associated with a standard of beauty is very important, right? Or a standard of excellence. And that's why right now you might even say that there might even be an oversaturation of us celebrating ourselves, right? We have hashtags about Black is beautiful, Black girl magic, Black boy joy, and then we're really inundating ourselves because we have to. We have to. I think the more and more you say something, the more and more we start to believe it, right? So
Wow. I'm trying to think about how to respond to that because I think about a child at 7, being asked that question. But then my question in turn is this classmate was also about 7. So where does a question like that come from?
mm,
You know?
exactly.
And and that's why when you said about your book that it's not just for Black children to read, Black girls to read, but it's for other children, other parents to read because it will hopefully in the future prevent some other little girl from having to select a box that says that she's other than she is.
Right.
And two, for some other child to not make those comments or even first to ask that question
Right.
and then respond as that young man did.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-mm-mm. Okay. Mm. Have you had that conversation with your daughter? Does she know about that story?
She's been hearing me talking more and more about it. And so that's
Okay.
why I'm also very mindful of the conversations I have with her and why I started having some of those conversations during our wash days because I noticed she was always asking me if she could wear her hair like her friends who had straight hair, whether they were Latinx or Hispanic or
Mhm.
white. And I realized a lot of that has to do to innocently with us just wanting something that we don't have, right? So
Mhm.
her friends will also say, "Oh, I want curly hair. Or I want to be able to do some of the things that you do." But I know for Black girls and boys, it goes a little bit deeper because again, um, I think that those messages we've carried for just generations and generations, and it was very important for me to not let some of it go and to just be very clear with my daughter that what makes our hair so beautiful is that we can actually transform it into so many different textures, but that because her hair is curly, she has the ability to do that as well, and so that it's magical and that it's not something to be ashamed of or mad or sad about.
That her hair is her crown and it is her beauty
Absolutely. Her
because of
power.
how it naturally comes out of her scalp.
Yeah, and her superpower. Mhm.
Yeah. And so, as parents are looking to have these conversations with their children, tell us where they can find your book.
Oh, great. So right now the book is being sold on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, but there's also a special site that I love to call out, which is called indiebound.org. And on this site, you can look up the book title and actually find where local and small businesses are selling the book near you. And so I also love to point that out because I really want people to support some of the small businesses and Black owned or women owned businesses out there. It also just got picked up by Walmart.com, and you will soon be able to purchase it directly from an author's copy on www.knowyourheritage.com. That will be coming to you in the next 2 weeks and should be up by April.
And not to worry, listeners, as always, we will have links to Zenda's book in our podcast notes. And we also will have it available on our Authored by Us bookshelf that will give you a direct link to her site so you can purchase the book from her there. So before we close, Zenda, can you share just a little bit more from Zara's Hair Day with us?
Sure, I'd love to. When I weave small cornrowed braids on your head that fall to each side, add a center braid adorned with beads or cowrie shells, we are celebrating the West African Fulani tribe. Sometimes I twist your hair into mini buns, similar to the South African Zulu. Why have one or two Bantu knots when you can have 22? When I part your hair into neat sections and form rope patterns with ease, we are celebrating a twisted hairstyle worn by the West African Senegalese.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love the rhythm and the rhyme of your book, and I so appreciate you sharing this with us. And as you say at the end of your book, as Zara says at the end of the book, "Mama, I'm ready to take on the world." I know that every child who reads Zara's Wash Day will be ready to take on the world.
Absolutely. And that is the hope and the dream.
Zenda, thank you so much for spending the time with us, sharing with us your book, Know Your Heritage, Zara's Wash Day, sharing your stories and your experiences, and really bringing a sense of pride and royalty to these crowns that we wear on our heads, all of us.
Thank you so much, Sora Zenzi, and I really appreciate you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Sora Zenda. I appreciate having you on our show, and I can't wait for our listeners to learn more about your book and have an opportunity to get a copy of it in their hands.
Absolutely. Thank you for your support, and I can't wait to be on with the next installment of the series.
Yay. So as we get ready to close the cover on this bookshelf gem, I would love to thank this week's author, Zenda Walker, for sharing her amazing book, Know Your Heritage, Zara's Wash Day. I would also like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, for being with us this week on this episode of Authored by Us. We encourage you to come back every week as we talk with a new author sharing their book. Until next time, happy reading.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Authored by Us. Every author has a story to tell, and we enjoy bringing their stories to you each week. Whether you are listening as a young reader or are sharing this podcast with the young readers in your life, we are delighted to celebrate these stories inspired by diversity and shared in the voice of their authors. Follow us on social media at Authored by Us and subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss an episode. Have a gem on your bookshelf that we should have on ours? Visit us online at authoredbyus.com and let us know. Until next time, happy reading.